Hi, this is Rodrigo from Frame Freak Studio, and this is the Creative Hoster Show. Today, I'm really excited because we have a really special guest here. This is someone I admire a lot because of his past and present work. His name is Sam Deats. He has been working in video games like Darksiders, Battle Chasers, and now is the director from Castlevania Netflix edition. So, welcome, Sam.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. So, first of all, for the few people that don't know about you, can you tell us a little bit more about your history? Was art something that you were doing since you were a kid, or was something that you took later in life?
Well, I think that I kind of always knew I was going to be doing something with art, ever since I was drawing Ninja Turtles in kindergarten. Uh, and I didn't really even consider another career path all the way through, high school and stuff, which probably made me a pain in the butt to work with my teachers, as I was kind of ignoring the classes I knew I didn't really need. um, I went into I just went to a local community college here in Austin, actually, ACC, and took classes there, trying to figure out art, animation, illustration, and I was trying to decide what I was going to do with art, whether it was going to be go into video game concept art, 3D animation, 2D animation, all that. But my heart was kind of in 2D animation. I always had a particular interest in it. I was really inspired by anime films, Ghibli. I loved Batman the animated series and the whole DC animated universe in general, like all that stuff. And so I kind of decided that I wanted to at least make some effort to pursue that, and I got a job at Powerhouse pretty early on in the studio's history, when there was only I think about 8 people here. Now we're I think over 80 at this point. So I started working here, and I kind of grew with the studio, and tried to push towards the things that I was passionate in, which is kind of the action animation type of thing, and I managed to make sort of a little a number of projects come towards the studio by trying to practice that and show that we could do it, and that sort of thing. And all that kind of led into doing Castlevania eventually.
Nice. I definitely can relate about having issues in class because of drawing, and it was also the Ninja Turtles. It was like a huge deal for me. uh, what was that attracted you about 2D animation? Because right now I think in the world, especially since like Disney focus on 3D, there is a lot of people like trying to go into 3D animation. So what was that made you go like full into 2D?
um, that's an excellent question. There was just something about it that I was attracted to, and I think it was just watching how I love the process. For one, I feel more connected to the final product because of hands on each of the stages, and seeing my drawings there. I like the look of it in the end. I think that that eh, there's certain things you can do with 2D animation in order to like push and pull things, and make certain things more impactful that are at least trickier in 3D. And I I I just think a lot of it is also just the stuff that inspired me growing up. Like I said, growing up on Batman and on anime and Ghibli films and all that stuff.
Nice. And did you choose to go to as college or university to learn about art, or was it something that you learned on your own?
Um, So I went to ACC to specifically take art and animation classes and stuff like that. And, at first, I was planning on kind of taking some of the basic courses and stuff, and then look into one of the bigger schools. But I was concerned with having to pay a whole bunch of money and being in debt and all of that. And so I kind of decided to go with a little bit more of a combination of taking these classes and also being largely self-taught. I don't know if it's necessarily the best plan for everyone, but it ended up working out for me. I could totally see it not working out under slightly different circumstances, though. But that combination of taking classes for those basics, as well as doing a lot of projects that on my own, just figuring out little things to try and practice and figure out what I was bad at and needed to work at, and really working those muscles.
Yes, because there is this, I don't know how to call it, maybe a trend that I see people going to school and then it's like they go out and they take this attitude of, oh, we're out, we don't have to learn anything again. And usually they do not end well. All these people that I see that they are doing exactly this, they usually do not end well. They pretty much become irrelevant really fast to the industry, especially in the creative industry where, like, you gotta get better every day. So,
Yeah, really, school is for getting you good enough to get your foot in the door, and that's about the best that most people end up getting out of the experience. I personally am night and day different artist than I was when I was right out of school, and my hard work and my dedication and my continued growth came through the past 11 years working at Powerhouse now. Just constantly wanting to get better, constantly learning from the experiences from the projects that I've been lucky enough to work on over the years, and I don't see that learning stopping anytime soon. And now I'm kind of teaching people while at the same time I'm learning, and I'm learning along with just trying to become a better artist. I'm learning how to teach other people and how to relay information to other individuals so that we can create art as a team better. And that's a whole other set of skills that I've had to pick up on the job. So you never really stop. You never really stop learning, for sure.
definitely. I think we're lucky, my team specifically, because when we were like into school, into college, it was this exactly moment where internet started to become like really good, where Facebook and YouTube was coming up, and then we were able to find a lot of classes to learn animation from, books, things that like learning that we could actually go into Google and oh, how do I learn animation? And then we had like a lot of books and courses that we could take. So internet became like a really powerful tool for us. So it was the same for you, or
Uh,
did you learn by experimenting?
it was so when I was in school, like the internet was still pretty young. This was in the early 2000s, and there was a decent amount of stuff out there, but I don't even know if YouTube was around, or at least it wasn't particularly useful at the time. But there weren't that many resources. There were a few things, and I certainly could pick up on some stuff. But man, nowadays, like there are just a ridiculous number of tutorials for like doing concept art and drawing, and you can watch these masters doing streams and all this kind of stuff. So it's really just like an excellent space for young people to learning. You know, I see people that are 21 years old that are painting like masters at this point, and it's because of how many resources there are for getting the right information early on. And not all that stuff was around. There's some of it floating around, but it certainly wasn't as strong as it is nowadays. I mean, I love going to there's this site called what is it, Sakuga Boru, something like that. That is just a massive database where you can search for specific things that you want to find from like an animation, usually from anime. And it's just this wonderful thing where it's like, I really need reference for fire or an explosion or something like that. You punch it in, and there's all these masterful pieces of animation of for you to look at for inspiration. And that stuff certainly didn't exist when I was in school. I'm happily learning from all of that right now.
This is great. Like, I'm really happy to be born into this era where we have all these tools, and definitely I can relate to you. There was a good friend of mine who started like working at the same time I did, and he was working like really hard, but on the side he was buying like this amazing computer and then a lot of things to improve it and to use it better, especially for games. And he had like a younger brother, very young. And the thing was that because my friend was working a lot, this guy who was like 15 years old at the time, he had like the best computer, he had like the PlayStation 3 and all these things, and he started like messing up with that. And by the time he was 16, he was doing things in developing into games, learning a lot of stuff on his own that we were looking like, damn, like we are still not doing anything close to that. And this was just like a 16-year-old boy. So it's really amazing to be in this era where you can take advantage of this.
Yeah, it gives me a lot of faith in the next generation, watching how, especially, artists and, people that are getting into coding and game design and stuff like that, seeing how the internet era has affected them and how they're clearly just like skyrocketing to new heights very quickly because of the internet era. I'm like, all right, cool. This is a good thing.
Definitely. Also, I stumbled up on your DeviantArt, and I see that you are doing like a lot of different kind of art, and that you are really well-rounded artist who can do like storyboards, concept design, illustration, animation.
Thank you.
How did you get? I'm assuming that it took a lot of work, but how did you got to be able to get good into all these areas?
A lot of artists, especially while they're going through school, they're kind of nudged towards trying to have their own, like, I guess, their own style, their own voice, their own identity in their art, and for that to appear through basically a certain set of design choices and habits, really, for how to draw characters and draw environments, stuff like that, and to have a specific style that's associated with them. And that was something that I never really took on, especially as an animator, and being an animator who learned in the U.S. But was inspired by Eastern style animation. I learned to animate cartoonier designs and more simplified designs very early on, while at the same time working at wanting to animate these more complex volumetric designs for anime style work, kind of in conjunction. And part of that was due to necessity, not knowing where the industry was going to go, where I was going to go, if I was going to end up at a studio where I'd be doing cartoonier work, or if I was going to be able to pursue my passion in this kind of anime-ish style work. So I kind of decided that it would be best not to get stuck in one area, and instead focused on trying to understand design in general, understand drawing in general, and instead of creating working towards having a style, I learned to use style instead, to create a style that is specific to the projects that I was working on. And some of that came from, learning from all the myriad of other artists that are out there and trying to understand, learn from them and learn how they take shape and form and manipulate it to, create a particular feeling and create a particular look that would serve a particular project. And part of it was just working on projects that required me to shift styles. So really it's a combination of, not jumping into a particular mold and making and working on a variety of projects that forced me to learn to understand design, and instead of just kind of like having my own natural habits and influences subconsciously affect my my style.
Nice. Definitely, there is a lot of hard work there.
That was probably a little too involved of an answer, but I hope that was helpful.
Yes, definitely. Also, uh, this is a tricky question that I'm about to do, but when you started working professionally into art,
Mhm.
what was something that you didn't expect it at all that came through and is really important into the industry?
Something I didn't expect
Yes.
that ended up being very important. God, I don't know. There's so many. It was just lots of lessons learned, but I don't know if it was something that, if it was because I didn't expect certain things, or if it was just because I didn't think about it until it was happening. For example, how often I use spreadsheets. Oh man. I end up cracking open spreadsheets way more often than I expected early on. I do more math than I thought I would. That's for damn sure. Especially when you're trying to figure out at least help with figuring out budgets and stuff like that, and you're trying to make sure not to bust budget, and etc. That's a big part of it. When I was straight out of school, I was kind of a little more on the shy, awkward side, and I don't know if it was something I didn't expect, but I certainly had to open up quite a bit on the more social side in order to work with others, and especially when I started directing other folks and stuff like that. That's probably something I expected. I just didn't I didn't really plan around it.
Yeah, I definitely expect started out as well in the shy spectrum of people and had to put a lot of work. It actually took me like 3 years to learn about social dynamics and a lot of things into psychology because I was so bad at socializing that it got to a point where it said, okay, like I have to learn this stuff because if not, not going to be able to get any job at all.
Yeah, seriously, I had to like do some straight up training montages and socializing a little bit. Anyone else out there who's has trouble with being awkward and talking with folks, it's just like anything else. It's a skill that you learn. I had to learn it too.
Also, this is something that many people, I don't think they consider it very well, that when they say, oh yeah, I want to live from my art, that usually they have been doing art as a hobby and then they want to join like into the professional world and they discover that they have to learn these kind of business skills. How was that for you?
Um, One of the nice things with working here at Powerhouse for so long is that I've been able to learn those things kind of over a long stretch while working with the CEO, Brad Graper, because he kind of like, he runs all that stuff, but I've sort of, picked up on things along the way. It was never like, at least in my case, aside from doing, a little bit of freelance here and there, it was never this dire situation where, I had to handle the business side of things. I just kind of like, all right, Brad's kind of got that. I'll get a little bit along the way. But fortunately, because I'm working in a studio environment, and we have people whose jobs are to do that and to find projects and to figure out how to pay for them and all that kind of stuff. It hasn't been something I had to focus a whole lot on, and that's been kind of beneficial for me. So it's one of the nice things with working in a studio and in a service studio in particular, is to an extent you can be in a situation where you can focus on the art a little bit more until you start doing directing type stuff, and now you're managing a whole bunch of people.
Nice. Also, on the other hand, what was something that you completely expected from being an artist as a professional that came through and is important?
Um, let's see, something that I completely expected. Well, I mean, I'm trying to think of a specific answer that is useful in some way. I'm just kind of like, well, you got to be pretty good at art.
Sorry about that.
And there's this is a tough question to kind of parse a little bit. I think that I'm not sure how to answer that one, honestly. It's because I expected to go into art, and to an extent, like, I knew that there is like we were just talking about, kind of the business side of things, and I fortunately, I learned early on that not everything I was going to be doing when I get into this is going to be my project. So it's I had a pretty easy time being able to separate what I was doing mentally, so that I knew that, hey, I'm making this for for Joe Mad, or I am making this for the guys over at Stoic, and trying to and like, being perfectly accepting of the notes and revisions and all that kind of stuff, because at the end of the day, you're trying to, especially when you're working under these individuals, you know that this is their baby, this is theirs, and you're trying to help them make it. And that was something that I fortunately picked up on pretty quickly, and it wasn't too big of it wasn't too big of a shock or anything, but I know that some artists can struggle with sometimes, like wanting to kind of put their own personal stamp on it. And you can still do that while also trying to get bring someone's project to life.
Definitely.
That wasn't a super good answer to your question, but it was something.
Okay. Starting with the questions about Castlevania, wanted to see if you knew where this idea came from, because usually so far there has been this course that when video games are taken into movies or series, they usually end up really, really bad. But luckily, it wasn't the case this time. It was great.
Thank
But
you.
do you know where this idea came from, like taking Castlevania and put it into an animated format?
Well, this started over 10 years ago. I think it's actually about 12 years at this point, where Kevin Coldy really wanted to acquire the rights to make an animated Castlevania something. And he I think that he wanted to take a stab at breaking that curse, and he thought that there's got to be a way to make that work, and he thought that Castlevania had the right bones for making that work. I mean, I think that part of doing an adaptation that works is really just like picking the right adaptation, and you can't really take you can't take everything and make a movie out of it, or make a cartoon series out of it or something like that. I think that there's certain things that just aren't naturally going to work. Like make Dragon Ball into a live action film. That maybe wasn't the best idea.
Yeah.
So I think that identifying Castlevania as being a series that would work well and adapt well was really the big thing, and it was very smart on Kevin's part to pick not just Castlevania, but also to go with Castlevania 3, which has a whole cast of characters, has certain things thematically that were built into the NES game, with Trevor being excommunicated by the church, and Lisa being burned at the stake and everything. That was already there. That was in the NES game, and it was fleshed out a little bit more in some of the later games, but that's a lot of bones for just telling a good story, where you don't have to get stuck on the idea of it's a video game. It's just like, no, you can make a story out of this. And so I think that's a big part of where that came from. And I don't know exactly the whole process that Kevin went through in order to acquire the rights and getting things started and all that. But I do know that a big part of it was just identifying the right project, and him being a video game fan himself, and really wanting to do Castlevania was that was a big part of it too.
Yeah. Also, there is this idea that the visual style of anime is exclusive to Japan. Why did you decide to choose this visual style for the series?
I get asked a lot, like, were you worried about the fact that this is, you're basically trying to make this an, is this an anime? The people asking if I think it's an anime and all that kind of stuff, and I think that's really up to other folks how they want to define anime, whether it be a visual style or a genre, if it be something that is just animation from Japan. And everyone seems to have kind of a different definition of it, and I'm just going to kind of leave that to them. Really going into the visual style of the series, I ignored all of that. I just didn't really think about it. It honestly didn't cross my mind until folks were asking me the question. I went in knowing, hey, this is Castlevania. It has, especially through the artwork of Ayami Kojima, it's clear that there's a look in a design language that this series is known for, we should try to pull inspiration from that. We should try to do something that looks like that. And being a fan, I really wanted to draw inspiration from that. And so, that's the question of anime or not anime, or if it's if there's something wrong with that. It didn't cross my mind. I just wanted to make the show the best way that I thought it should be made, and that was to draw inspiration from the stuff that I loved about the series.
Definitely. Also, as fan of the games, we were able to identify a lot of details that only true fans can see, and and a lot of visual details as well. So I wanted to ask you, is there a lot of fans of the game inside of the creative team, or it is the result of a lot of investigation? Because I also saw that you got like the Nintendo games from eBay and started playing a lot.
Oh well, I've been playing the game since I was a kid. Me and my brother Adam, who's the assistant director on the project, we've been playing it since the NES games, and so I've kept up with it since. I think that the only games in the series that I haven't played were, I think there's like two of the Game Boy games, like the original Game Boy, that I didn't get around to. Is like the one with Sonya. I don't think I played. And then there's like some really obscure ones. I think like a mobile game and shit like that. But I've played every game in the series, and I'm a pretty diehard fan. Me and my brother and a handful of other folks at the studio, they are fans. And Kevin Coldy, the executive producer on the show, is a fan as well. That being said, Warren Ellis, the writer, he doesn't play video games at all. He's not really familiar with them or anything like that. So he actually went into it doing all that crazy amount of research, and so I one of the amazing things to me when we started on the project is receiving the first scripts and seeing how much Warren was pulling from even kind of obscure things from the series that he came across just simply because of the fact that he did the research on it, and he actually put in that kind of effort. And that in combination with Konami worked with him early on with trying to get those have the scripts be that right balance of being sticking close enough to canon, but not so much that it hinders the ability to tell a good story and that sort of thing. That there was kind of a little bit of a group effort there with him working, 10 years ago with Koji Igarashi and Konami to really keep the story faithful and stuff like that. But despite the fact that Warren doesn't play video games, he did an excellent job of identifying the stuff that mattered, that stuff that counted, and keeping that all untouched and making the tweaks that made the most sense for telling the story the best way.
Nice. Also, this is something that happens a lot, I see, especially in animation, that everybody thinks it is easier than it actually is. So, for example, there is a video that we did in the past where it took us about 1.5 years to do and $30,000, and then there comes a client asking to do a similar video in just 2 weeks for $200, and it's like, no.
That goes.
Can you explain in more detail, pretty much how much time it took and work it took to produce each episode from the concept into the final form?
Well, one important thing to point out is that the episodes are a lot of the episodes are made at essentially at the same time. So when you're working on one part of the process, another part of the process is going. You can have teams working on multiple episodes at a time, and so on and so forth. So the time that it takes to do one episode is fairly lengthy, but you also have generally lots of people working on it, and a staggered schedule that allows all of them to be hit at the same time. And the so this amount of time is going to sound like a lot, but really because of the fact that we're working with that staggered schedule, it's not that crazy. But when we receive the scripts, we have first we go through what's called pre-board designs, which is any new designs that appear, any new environments that appear, and stuff like that. We do a quick rough design pass of all those things so that we can start storyboarding, and that's an important part of the process because after we've kind of figured those things out and laid them out and stuff, we can't make major changes without having to go back and reboard certain things, especially when it comes to the environments. But we go through that initial design phase, and that goes into storyboarding and animatics. And the storyboard and animatics process, from beginning to end, we have a pretty, for a single episode, there is about I think it's 14-week or so period where we can work on it. But that doesn't mean we're constantly working on it because we're hopping between other episodes. A lot of the time what we would do is we work on an episode, get that to a point where we can ship it for review. We work on another episode and get that to a point while notes are happening, and we go back and revise things and start cleaning them up, and we kind of hop back and forth between episodes that way. So it's not kind of like a constant amount of work that we're doing to do that. It's just we're kind of jumping back and forth. And at a certain point, we have to cut things off and allow the environments to be designed and the character models and all that kind of stuff to happen in conjunction with finalizing the storyboards. After the animatic and the storyboards and all that kind of stuff has been taken care of, we put together the package that is for animation to begin. So we work with an overseas studio, MUA Film, that has helped us out with doing, they've been our animation partner on this project. One of the unique things with Powerhouse, though, is that while we've been working with them to do the bulk work on the animation, we've also provided key animation and rough animation for important scenes throughout the first season. So we actually have done a considerable amount of work to make sure that things move the way that we want them, to make sure certain shots, certain expressions, and etc. come back the way that we want. The actual animation process, oh geez, how long is that generally? A single episode from beginning to end is probably, I think, about 5 months or so. Keeping in mind, of course, like I said, there is a staggered schedule. They do their layouts first. The layout team moves on to, there's, I think, two teams that they stagger back and forth between. After the layout team A is done, they move on to, the third episode, and team B is on the second episode, and after they're done, they move on to the fourth episode, and that's how they're able to move fairly quickly through these things. But like I said, a single episode from beginning to end takes about 5 months. You start a good chunk of that, about a month and a half, is spent doing retakes and doing the final polish. Actually, it's about 2 months. So there's 3 months of the actual animation, about a month of retakes, and then a final polish. And one of the that final polish is another thing that Powerhouse does that you don't see a whole lot in certain other American productions. What we do there is we actually do quite a bit of post-production work on the scenes. We basically redo the compositing in order to apply, in-depth lighting effects, particle effects. We a lot of time tweak backgrounds, sometimes completely repaint backgrounds that we want to improve, and even go so far as to reanimate scenes, reanimate effects, and we went and did hundreds of shots of model fixes. So we went through, entire scenes of animation where we were like, this is a little bit off. Let's go in here and tweak that, and polished all of the animation in that regard. So we were very involved with the whole process of animation, because we have the artists that can do that stuff, So that was a lengthy way of explaining, but a single episode, takes from beginning to end about 10 months or so to make. But because we work on all of them at the same time, or we work on a staggered schedule, where we have, something is happening on every episode at any given moment. There is, it doesn't take all that long to get through every episode. It's not going to take us 8 years to get through season 2, because we're currently working on every episode in the season at the same time now at this point. Now, there was a period where we were waiting on scripts to come in for each episode, and so those were coming in order. We would start on episode 1, then the next episode would come in, and we'd work on episode 2 for a period, getting designs ready, and then that starts on storyboards and so on and so forth. So we do work basically in order to get through that stuff, but there is, like, once we have everything in and once we're rolling, we're really touching every episode at the same time, like I said.
Nice. Also, you mentioned that you have that you hire a team overseas. Is there anyone from Powerhouse or Frederator acting as a supervisor there, or is everything handled through the internet?
Everything's handled through internet, basically. We went over there and met the team and kind of went over the project with them and stuff like that early on. But having someone out there for a lengthy period is just not terribly realistic. So we that happens with some productions where you'll have a supervisor that'll go out and they'll spend a month there or something like that. But for us, it just wasn't something that we could really make work. In very rare, extreme situations where we're trying to get things together towards the end, it's possible to send someone out last minute and help out for a little bit. But so far, we've kept everything remote, and that's worked out fine.
I could imagine so. Also, what software do you use to animate? Do you use Toon Boom Harmony, or do you use something else?
So we do our storyboarding in Storyboard Pro, and so naturally we because in Storyboard Pro you can just take an individual scene and export it for a Toon Boom Harmony file. We've been doing the animation inside of Toon Boom Harmony. That being said, I kind of for the service work at Powerhouse, quite a bit of we generally work in Flash. I guess Adobe Animate is what it's called now. and that's treated us all right. It's an inexpensive solution, especially if you already have Photoshop and After Effects. You just get the whole Creative Cloud suite, and you have everything that you need in order to do animation production. For long form projects, I think that inevitably you have to make the switch to something like the Toon Boom pipeline or something like that. Maybe for the most part, especially if you're going to work with an overseas studio. I think that's something that you're kind of forced to do. The overseas studio, they work on paper. They still have peg bars and light tables and all that kind of stuff that they work with. But when we provide animation, we provide it in a template that they can put on a peg bar and a light table, and they'll do any in-betweening or any cleanup right there on paper. Oddly enough.
Nice. Also, can you explain a little bit more into detail about the dynamic of the production itself? Like, which part is taken care by Frederator, which part is taken care by Powerhouse, and also the other studios overseas?
Yeah. So the producers are Frederator and are folks that Kevin Coldy had reached out to and all that. But when it comes to the pretty much all of the art and everything, the animation, that is handled over at Powerhouse. Frederator, Kevin Coldy over at Frederator, he hired like the casting director. He handles the process of working with Warren to get those scripts taken care of. He hired the musician for the project and takes care of setting up recording sessions and all that stuff. So that's all on his side of things. When it comes to pretty much everything after the scripts come in, we tackle that. We do the designs, the storyboards, the animatics. We manage the animation. So anything that we tackle here at Powerhouse, we handle all of that, and we manage MUA film. So we're the ones that reach out to MUA. We're the ones that are in contact with them, and we ship all the materials to them to handle everything that they're going to do. So MUA film does the bulk of the animation work, and they, like I said, they work on paper, and they deliver that back to us as After Effects composited shots, and we take, that's when it comes back into our hands, and like I said, we do a thorough post-production pass on every shot. So we redo the compositing in many cases, and we clean up the lighting and the colors and all that, and we make any tweaks that we need to animation and all that stuff. And finally, we put it all together and take that over to have sound effects and stuff done by Salami, is who we worked with on season 1, and it's all put together with the sound and everything and shipped off.
Nice. Also saw that there was a video launched in Frederator talking more details about the series itself. They mentioned that you had like a lot of inspiration from a series called Berserk. Was that true?
Oh yeah, I love the Berserk manga. I think that it has some really excellent artwork, really cool story arcs for the characters, and visually it's very interesting. The anime, the recent anime that decided to go 3D animation was a bit disappointing. Not gonna lie, it did not translate the manga as well as I had hoped, both visually and through the way that it's directed is a little bit odd at times. So I can't say that I pull a lot of inspiration from that, but I did think that the recent films that went over the Golden Age arc was were handled well. At least they were directed well, and while there was a little bit of the occasional awkward 3D, they mostly looked nice, and like I said, they were paced well. The mood and the feeling was right, and all that kind of stuff. So I thought that I still drew inspiration from at least how those were directed.
Yeah, definitely I'm a big fan of the manga and the history itself, and I share with you the disappointment of the new series. So please, if you can, try to pitch so you can do the animation for the series or something.
We'll see. We'll see.
Nice. So, also for the people who want to start their careers as an artist, as an animator, what do you think is the most common mistake that people do when they are starting out? That they are not aware that they are doing it, but they are doing it a lot.
Number one thing that I see from artists is that they're not focusing enough on draftsmanship. Draftsmanship is extremely important. You got to learn to draw well, and that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about people focusing on trying to have their own style, and I just don't think that that's particularly helpful for a young artist. I think that young artists should be learning to understand design, understand drawing, and to become better draftsmen. And focusing on those fundamental skills, because those will affect everything that you're doing from then on out. I think that there's a little bit of a balancing act between in this industry, especially when you're working on series productions, where you may have a lot of great ideas for how to improve the efficiency of a production and to handle things in a smart way and stuff. But there is something to be said for not reinventing the wheel. And there's certain things in the process that you don't want to start over with when it comes to how to manage certain things and all that. And it's sometimes better to get in and figure out how things currently work, and then slowly make changes along the way, rather than jumping in and getting ahead do yourself, wanting to make sweeping changes to how an entire industry works. Don't do that. Jump in, see how things are ran. Show that you can work within that, but then start to make suggestions and start to make changes, and try to improve things once you can prove that something can run more smoothly as a particular way. Can be improved upon, because it's especially when you're dealing with a lot of stuff, you may think that you know a better way, but even if it could be a better way, it isn't necessarily the right time to do it. And sometimes better to like I said, make incremental changes. And don't be afraid of the slow growth as an artist. I think that a lot of young folks they get intimidated by those 21-year-olds that are just exceptionally good, and I think that means that they just can't really make it or something like that. I would consider myself to be a slow learner. I think that there's young people that are way ahead of what I was when I was their age. But there's other there's other avenues to success. There's other ways to to grow and to do well. And sometimes it might be that you can take a road that isn't going to have that instant gratification and have that slow boil, and that there's nothing wrong with that.
Definitely. And it's curious that you mentioned this because, well, if this was like the time where I was spending a lot of time in DeviantArt and I have found your portfolio, like your portfolio will have been like very intimidating to me. But at the same time, like I started to see this trend. So for example, you see a series with a lot of success like Rick and Morty, and you watch the pilot and the art is like crap. And then you watch the pilot of Adventure Time and again like the art is not like the best it can be. And there is this series in Japan where it's like a more strict industry where One Punch Man, probably you have seen it already. When if you see the art of the guy who did the history, like the artist sucks. Like I could do better things when I was in 8th grade, and yet the history was so good that he actually got success. And like they are redoing the manga with a good visual style. They have the anime ready, and it's been a big hit. Even though like the art of the guy itself was crap. So how do you see that in the industry? Is this going to become like a bigger trend in the future?
Oh, it's kind of hard to say whether that'll be the case, but I mean there is something to be said for folks that focus on story more than on the art itself. And you'll find that a lot of the folks that are good storytellers that you might work with may not be the best artists, but that's not a bad thing. I mean, honestly speaking, like you don't always want your best artist to be someone who's spending all of their time, doing a lot of the running a project, or to manage things, or to be kind of overseer, because that keeps them away from doing the art. So there's I think that sometimes people jump to funny conclusions when they'll see an art director that maybe isn't the best artist in the room. But I look at that and I'm like, well, that's smart. The art director spends so much time, having to manage things and make sure things are getting done, and staying on schedule, and all that kind of stuff, that really their focus should be on, having a good eye and understanding these concepts and having a creative vision, but not necessarily, they also have to have, excellent management skills. And so there is kind of a little bit of a balance there when it comes to, you have sometimes like the weaker artists that are that are handling management in a lot of cases, and that's not that bad. That's sort of different from the One Punch Man scenario, though. But it's not too crazy. I mean, you see web comics. I mean, you see comic strips and all that kind of stuff that end up being animated in some way, and sometimes those are by amazing artists. I think that One Punch Man just stands out because that artist sort of works, I guess, purposefully crude, and so it being translated into a manga that with updated art has like this obvious contrast to go back and look at. But you can kind of see that even in series like Attack on Titan, where the art in the manga isn't the best. Like it's pretty rough around the edges, but it was translated into a pretty awesome anime. And so that's another scenario where someone who maybe doesn't necessarily have the strongest drawing skills told a story that people liked, and someone wanted to get a team together of really solid animators and background artists and all that kind of stuff, and make a show out of it. So I don't think that's going to be going away. I think it's just a lot easier to take something that exists, that like a comic, like a web comic, and figure out a way to translate that to animation when we already see that it's successful.
Yes, definitely. I think the internet is going to be messing up a lot of industries in the future. Also, this is a hard question, a really hard question that I like to ask all the people that I interview. And it goes like this. Imagine that you wake up tomorrow and you're in another dimension. Nobody knows you.
I'm sorry. What was that first part?
Oh, that...
What?
Sorry. Imagine that you wake up tomorrow and you're in a whole different dimension. Nobody knows about you, but you have your experience, you have your skills, you have a computer, and you have $500. What do you do to get into this point that you are right now at your professional career as soon as possible?
That's an interesting one. $500, man. I mean, that's got to kind of go to rent, doesn't it? It takes time to build a wait, did you say that I have my portfolio?
No, you have your skills and your knowledge, but that's it.
This is a hard game. First things first is that you got to just kind of live long enough to build a portfolio. I mean, I would need to spend a few months trying to recreate something that I could show to studios, because I wouldn't hire someone that doesn't have any art to show. So first things first is getting a regular job somewhere, so that I can live for a little bit and start to get back on my feet, able to at least support myself while I build that portfolio. And from there, it's like doing a bunch of research on what studios and stuff exist out there, and figuring out what this weird new dimension is like, so that I can figure out where I can work and how to function in it. And then from there, this is an interesting question. Kind of, I would think that this time around, because I have stronger drawing skills and stuff than I did starting out back when I was a kid out of school, I could build that portfolio real quick, but this time focus more on storytelling, because now having that combination of two skills and going in and trying, I think that I can show a little bit more of what I can do by trying to develop stories and maybe put some stuff out that I can show when I go over to these studios and stuff like that, and possibly even pitch stuff. But I would think that I would probably do that in conjunction with trying to just land an art job with the portfolio I just made in a couple of months.
Nice. Also, any last advice that you would like to give to young artists who want to start their careers that we haven't talked about in this interview?
Uh, so I've talked about how you got to work on draftsmanship. The don't be afraid of slow boil and taking your time. You don't need to worry about, I think a lot of kids, they get out of school and expect to jump straight into, big jobs over at, Disney or Nickelodeon or something like that. And there's nothing wrong with going and finding a smaller studio that gives you the room to kind of grow and learn. That's worked out rather well for me. I've always had a roof over my head, and I've always had food on my table, working at Powerhouse while at the same time I've been learning and growing as an artist. And in this scenario, I just happened to be lucky enough that the studio grew with me, and we started to acquire, bigger projects that allowed me to grow more into and to become a director. So, it's okay to look at some of those smaller studios and find places where you'll be able to grow. And there's something else to consider is just the fact that when you do work at some of these bigger studios and stuff, there's a good chance that even some amazing artists, they'll go to whether it be a game studio or they over at one of the other studios where, despite the fact that they're amazing, they get kind of they get lost amongst everyone else. Whereas with a smaller studio, you do stand out a bit more, and it gives you more opportunities for trying new things and learning and growing from them. I guess that's the big stuff. We've gone over a lot of stuff. I've rambled a lot.
Also, if people want to find you online, where will be the best place to do it?
Oh, I've got a Tumblr that's is it Sam Deats or is it Samuel Deats? I'm looking at my own Tumblr real quick because I forget what my what I used. It's Samuel Deats. Yeah, I'm on Tumblr as Samuel Deats. I'm pretty sure I'm the only Sam Deats that's alive right now, so searching for me online is pretty easy. I have DeviantArt. I have a Twitter. I have a presence in a few of those. I'm not great about social media, but I'm getting there.
Nice. Thank you for being here and giving us your time and your knowledge. It has been an amazing experience.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
This has been the last episode of the Creative Hustler Show. Please, if you have liked it, please click like in the video button below and also share these interviews with your friends. Until next time.